weather at the moment is actually perfect for in-crop application, and some growers with winter cereals are taking the opportunity of dry conditions at the moment, and they're applying pig slurry in crop, again using a dribble bar system. So again, that sort of limits the amount of lateralization that's happening there, and we're just maximizing recovery of that nitrogen.
Long-term tillage land will always benefit from an application of organic manures. Not only do these manures provide essential nutrients like N, P and K, but they also contribute organic matter, trace elements, and help to stimulate soil biology, enhancing overall soil fertility. There are very few downsides to incorporating organic manures into a tillage system. You are listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. I would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. With more opportunities for tillage farms to access organic manures locally, it's important to get the correct organic manures for your farm. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Michael McKeon, a pig specialist with Teagasc, and Ciaran Collins, a tillage specialist with Teagasc, to discuss why pig slurries is particularly well suited for the use of tillage crops. Ciaran, it's been a really lovely time over the last couple of weeks, lovely dry weather. How is the planting progressing out there at the moment?
Really good, really good. I suppose in comparison to last year, we were really in a wet spell, and, it was well into April before we got going. And, I think by the end of this week, some growers could actually be finished, or certainly there'll be a big dent in it. So I suppose the real positive is the dry weather, and that sowing conditions are so good. That's been a big positive, really. So we'll take it. It's good for winter crops as well. That dry weather is certainly helping too,
It is, surely. So, Ciaran, we're here today to talk a little bit around organic manures, and there's probably a lot more organic manures on offer to tillage farmers out there over the last number of years. Is there much of a difference between the different types of organic manures that would be on offer?
I suppose there is. I suppose, firstly, all organic manures, I suppose, are good in the sense of, they do help build our base fertility, and obviously very good for organic matter and that, and helps the soil constituents and performance. But I suppose, as you said, they're not all the same, and have, I suppose, different organic manures have different suitabilities for different crops, I suppose, really. But like, certainly if you kind of break them down in terms of nitrogen, the likes of pig slurry would be quite high, as would some of the broiler litter as well, And I suppose it does depend a little bit on what you're looking for sometimes, again, the poultry litter and that would be very high in phosphorus, So again, I suppose, look, it's just kind of getting an organic manure that suits your soil test and your farm, really. And obviously then there is the whole availability, what's near you, and just matching that then to your soil test and the crop that you're growing, really.
Okay, so generally speaking, they're all good, but maybe just slightly different homes.
I think so.
In terms of, and you mentioned pig slurry there in passing, is that particularly well suited to tillage farming?
It is really, I suppose, in the sense of, a typical analysis, and we'll maybe tease this out a little bit later in the podcast, is at 4% dry matter. And that's important to, that we do have a good estimate of what the dry matter is. But at 4% dry matter, old money, 1,000 gallons is worth 19,720, or the equivalent of a bag of 19,720. So in terms of a balance, you are like with the phosphorus, that 720 is a sort of, a 3-to-1 ratio there, which is quite suitable for tillage crops. It is quite high in nitrogen, but we have to make sure that we manage to maximize, I suppose, the amount of nitrogen that we get from every 1,000 gallons we apply.
Michael McKeon, can I bring you in there just at the minute? I mean, there's pig farmers had, obviously their stock is in all the time, but are they generally eager to empty their slurry tanks at this time of the year, or is it pretty much an ongoing kind of thing?
Yep. First of all, before I come to that, Michael, thanks very much for the invite to come on the podcast. I certainly wouldn't be an expert on the tillage side of things, but I would have spent many a summer driving a far combine harvester, so I have some understanding of the challenges, I suppose, in the tillage sector. Yeah, the pig production, unlike say cattle, is 52 weeks of the year. So there's pigs are born every week, there's pigs are sold every week. There's always the same level of stock on a pig farm, week in, week out for the 52 weeks of the year. So as a result of that, the amount of slurry being produced every week is exactly the same every single week of the year, including Christmas week. So there's no, I suppose, optimum time from a pig producer's point of view of moving slurry. They would like to move it on a constant basis. But obviously, from a tillage point of view, there are certain times of the year that you're going to be looking for it more than as the other times of the year.
Ciaran, just to bring you back, you mentioned there a little bit around the nutrient value of pig slurry, but what's that worth, I suppose, in terms of a monetary kind of a value in comparison to a chemical fertilizer?
I suppose firstly, it obviously depends on the value or the cost of chemical fertilizer at the given point in time. And then obviously it depends on the nutrient content of the slurry. But just to take, we'll say fertilizer prices as they would be at the moment, or sort of typical prices that farmers would be buying NP and K with, and to compare that with pig slurry at 4% dry matter, 1,000 gallons of pig slurry would be worth somewhere in the region of between 30 and 35 euros per 1,000 gallons. So that's the value of the slurry, per 1,000 gallons. But you must also then work in the cost of spreading that slurry, and maybe if haulage comes into play, and there are other factors that people should consider. So, yeah, that'd be its value at current, we'll say, fertilizer prices.
And in terms of targeting that pig slurry, Ciaran, is that where should a farmer kind of go with it first on a tillage farm?
Ideally, targeting low index P and K sites is really the best way to approach it, because to do that with chemical fertilizer is really, really expensive, and I think pig slurry is ideal in that scenario. If you've index 1 or index 2, and to use that pig slurry for build-up, I think that's a very productive way of using pig slurry, and then you can top up with your chemical fertilizer as well. That being said, you can certainly grow a crop with just using pig slurry on its own, and topping up with some nitrogen, and plenty of farmers are doing that. But if you're new to pig slurry, I think targeting those low index sites, or crops with high demand, is certainly a good way to doing it. And then I suppose the other part of it is we need to maximize the nutrient recovery. So P and K is generally a little bit easier, but certainly the nitrogen aspect of that, it's targeting as near to growth as possible, to minimize those losses.
Okay, and is there a need to plow in or incorporate that slurry, Ciaran?
Yeah, it's certainly to limit volatilization. That would be the target. Really would be to incorporate between 3 and 6 hours, and that's how we maximize the nitrogen recovery. And there is some work going on, and there are some farmers doing it now. And I suppose the weather at the moment is actually perfect for in-crop application. And some growers with winter cereals are taking the opportunity of dry conditions at the moment, and they're applying pig slurry in crop, again using a dribble bar system. So again, that sort of limits the amount of volatilization that's happening there, and we're just maximizing recovery of that nitrogen.
And Michael, Ciaran is talking a bit there around the nutrient value of the pig slurries, but can that vary depending on the type of house it's after coming out of? In other words, if it's after coming out of say the fattening house versus out of where the sows are held, is it different along the way?
As you said, Michael, the dry matter of pig slurry is 4% in the nutrient analysis on the paper value of it, but it can vary slightly depending on the age of the pig. So if you have coming from sows, it might be slightly lower. It might be 3.5%. If you have it coming from, say, the finisher unit there, it might be 4.5%, or even 5%. So it will vary slightly, but probably the biggest thing on it is to make sure that the slurry has been it's been mixed, or it's been agitated before it actually comes onto the tillage farm, to make sure that there's no crust, to make sure that what you're getting then, if the tank has been it's been agitated, that you're getting a consistent amount of nutrients. So you're not getting highs and lows, and that's really where, as a tillage farmer, you just want consistency. So if it's 3.5% or 4% or 4.5%, you want it consistent. This is 4.5%, and that's what I'm getting. So at least when you know that consistency, you can plan around that then from a the nutrients for the crop.
I was talking, Michael, to a farmer recently who was taking pig slurry, and I can't remember whether it was on the farmer's farm himself, or it was on the pig's farm, on the piggery, where there was almost like a reception tank where all the material was pumped in, and it was kind of agitated fairly well in there, and it seemed to be a very consistent way of, or a very good way of getting that consistent material.
Yeah, certainly. If the unit has that, you wouldn't. Yeah, it'll depend from unit to unit whether they have that tank or not. What we would be recommending though is that it is agitated before it actually goes out on to tillage farms or onto any farm, because you're getting a much better mix of it there. As I said, and really you're looking at the likes of using a hydrometer. So hydrometer there, as you're aware, if you just put it into the slurry, and it will give you a reading as it bobs up and down. It'll give you a reading as to what the dry matter content of the slurry is. So once it's agitated, we would recommend that the pig producer has one and the tillage producer has one, just from a quality control point of view, that everybody is happy that this is at 4% of a dry matter, that they can just plan around it. And that's where, if from the pig sector point of view, or the pig producer's point of view, if he's agitating the tank when he has it well mixed up, he can take a sample off of there and say, yep, that's 4%. He can go and take a sample from the other end of the tank where it's agitated the other side and take it, and it's still 4%. And he's happy enough then that the quality of the slurry being pumped from that tank is, whether it be 50, 100, 200,000 gallons from that tank, is of the same consistency.
Okay. And Michael, some of the pig farms are often located a bit of a distance away from tillage ground. How are those logistics organized, I suppose, to try and get that slurries to where it's actually needed?
Yeah, so generally, in fairness to the pig producers, I suppose they are very used to logistics of having trucks on the road, because from a feed point of view, they're well used to organising trucks from a feed point of view, or for whey, or for stuff like that. So it's no real different than organising the trucks then for pig slurry. So they can deliver it for pig slurry. It's the one thing they probably do need is just that if somebody's looking for pig slurry, to be able to plan in advance and say, right, I'm going to look for this amount of pig slurry. So therefore, from a pig producer's point of view, he needs to know that there's, right, I'm going to need 4 or 5 trucks on the road there next week to go to this particular farm, if it's umbilical spreading at the time or something like that. So it's just giving a bit of a heads up. And that really comes back to having a relationship with the pig producer and the tillage grower, so that over time, they learn to work much better with each other, and it's a win-win for both sides. But generally, I would say most of the pig producers would have no problem trying to organize logistics side of things to move the slurry.
And then the other side of that, Michael, there's a bit of paperwork and forms involved in that. How does that work?
If the pig producer is doing an export, then he will put up the export on the department, the Ag Food account, and then the grower will get a text message saying, does he wish to accept this export? So that's not a huge issue on either side. The pig producers are well used to putting that up in the system. They have a system in place for the units as they're exporting it in conjunction with the contractors. So all of that is very straightforward, and it's simply the tillage producer just has to accept that, and that's done based on he has the nutrient plan done beforehand, so he knows the amount of slurry that he's looking to take in, and he's able to say that to the pig producer and say, look, I'm looking for X amount of slurry, and yeah, there's no issue from that. Like, that's a very
very straightforward,
seamless way of doing it. Yeah.
Okay. And Ciaran, I did want to talk to you just a little bit around that NNP part that Michael mentioned there a second ago. How important is it that a tillage farmer would have that in place before sourcing any of these big slurries? Any slurries,
Yeah, look, firstly, I suppose, look, from a legislative perspective, we have limits, and we need to comply with that. And look, the only way you can do that is having a nutrient management plan on the farm. So that's the starting point. And I think then, you factor in then how much that you can take, and based on your crops and your expected yield. So that's the starting point. I think the other thing it's very important as well is like to adjust the fertilizer program to take account of the organic manures that you use, just so that you can avail of the cost savings, because sometimes, if crop nutrients can be supplied in excess, and then we don't reap the benefits of using them as well. So I suppose that's NNP is, I suppose, really the key part of the whole thing, really, just to make sure that you're obviously complying with all the rules firstly, but then that you're getting the savings as well,
Final question, Michael, just to you. There's, if somebody is looking to source some pig slurry, who would they contact to try and make that connection?
So if you're looking to source it, the tillage advisors are there, or actually, if you want to just contact us directly, the pig advisors, you'll find it on the Teagasc pig page. and the contact details are there, and simply say, look, I'm a tillage producer, and send us a text or an email or a call, and we will know the nearest pig producer in your area, and we can put the two of you together then.
Yeah, we set you up then. Okay, right.
Yep.
That's brilliant. Listen, Ciaran and Michael, really great to chat to you. It's good information there around certainly a cost-saving type scenario for lots of tillage farms. So again, thanks very much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, Michael.
Many thanks.
So that's it for this episode, and my thanks to Ciaran and Michael for joining me on the podcast. Next week on Tuesday the 25th of March, from 11 to 1 p.m, we're holding a farm walk in Matty and Miriam Moore's farm in Croghan, County Offaly. The walk is looking at how to utilise pig slurries in standing winter crops and replacing chemical fertilisers. Finally, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague, and as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.